So, our question for you all to think about this morning is, do you want to be a worker? Or, what is holding you back from being a worker? So, last Saturday night, Hannah and I, we went for a walk and we got chatting about a few things that we felt God was saying and doing to us at the moment. And we came to church the next day, and there was a time of sharing last week. And every single person that shared what was on their heart highlighted something that Hannah and I had been talking about the previous evening.
Yeah, so this morning is really just a summary of that. And so for those that weren't here, I'm just going to talk through all of the words that were given because they were really encouraging and they were really powerful. So Alison spoke about the passage in Matthew about sending out of the 72. And God calling his workers to the fields. And we'll read the exact passage later on. But she shared how the church is now in a new season and that we need to be praying for the workers to come. And she kind of declared that over us all. And then Rose came and she shared about how in the Garden of Eden, God had asked Adam, "Where are you?" And he replied, explaining that he was naked. But it was an irrelevant answer. It wasn't what God was actually asking him. It wasn't what God was focusing on in that place. And although it was true, it was a genuine reason, it was a genuine answer, it wasn't what God wanted. And we're going to talk later about how a lot of the time we can give genuine answers, but they're irrelevant to what God is doing and what he is meaning in this time. And then Michael came forward and he shared a lyric from the song "These Are the Days of Elijah" and about being the voice in the desert crying. And he was asking himself and us if we were in a position of crying out, if we were on our knees, if we were yearning for that in this season. And then Betty came forward and she prayed and she asked the question, is the church ready for Jesus' return? And she talked about how we're the bride of Christ and how she feels that she's got a yearning to pray for us to be ready. And she was saying how the last year she'd just been praying, "Come, Lord Jesus," over and over again. And she wants us to be ready for that. And there was such an urgency to her prayer. And then Sandra came forward and she shared, very similar to what Robin had spoken about a few weeks ago, about how it doesn't matter if you're feeling unequipped, because God wants to use you. And she was saying how her heart was breaking for some of the people that she works with. And so this was so encouraging, and it was clear that there's a new stirring in the church, not just here, in our hearts, everywhere. And we are the church together. And a new time has begun, and we don't want to be left out of the move of God that is here. Because it's already happening, and I think sometimes it can feel like you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting for something. But it's here. The time is now. It has come. It's been declared last week. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter if you're not kind of feeling anything either, because unfortunately our lives are not based on experience. God is always there, no matter what we're feeling, no matter where our head is at. So we just wanted to emphasize that a new season is here, and we want to be ready for it.
Yeah. So, is there anything that is holding you back from growing into all of these words that God is clearly giving his church? Are we actually ready to be workers? Like Alison said, there are few workers, but are you ready to be one of them? So, in order to step into this calling, we both feel like God is highlighting to us at the moment there is a need amongst us for breaking down barriers that are preventing us all from spiritual action and preventing us from being workers. There is definitely a sense of urgency running as a thread through these words. And this is something that we've both felt we've definitely needed the past 6 months and still need now. Specifically today, we wanted to talk about that and then pray for a breaking off. For us, a fear of man and gaining a refreshed vision of the fear of the Lord.
And so it's important to ask and reflect on the question, what prevents us from spiritual action? Because the words that were shared require a response, they require an action. And the biggest thing that we felt we do that holds us back is that we make excuses all the time about everything in life. And this is natural, if we're scared or we're nervous or procrastinating, but it becomes a problem, I think, if it becomes habit. and especially if we're then making excuses in our spiritual lives too. And I think, especially when we're making excuses about getting closer to God or not having an urgency or a passion for our commission on earth. And they may be relevant excuses, exactly like Adam in the Garden of Eden. What he said was true and undoubtedly important, but they are excuses nonetheless. And passivity is not a place that you want to stay in for too long. So I just wanted to highlight Exodus 4, 10 to 14, and it's about Moses, and I'll just read it now. I love this because I think we've all been here. So it says, "But Moses said to the Lord, 'Oh my Lord, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue.' Then the Lord said to him, 'Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore, go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak.' But then Moses said, 'Oh my Lord, please send someone else.'" And I just love that. God clearly says to him, "I will be your mouth and your eyes and your tongue." And he just says, "No, I really don't want to go." But God wasn't worried about anything else. He just wanted Moses to be willing. He just wanted a willing heart. So we must retrain almost our spiritual brain to recognise these earthly excuses and to stop making them, really. Because really it's an internal decision. Like what Heather said this morning, it's blatantly obvious that we just have to stop making them. And it's something that only we can do. Because God is moving, but we're the ones that hold ourselves back from jumping into his presence with passion and freedom if we're making excuses.
Yeah. Also, a relevant barrier that is preventing spiritual growth is definitely a fear of judgment from other people, a fear of man, essentially. When you judge someone, it's such a common thing to do, like a passing comment. You're putting your opinion first and not God's, based off of someone else's perceived flaw. And for the person on the receiving end, that's so extremely damaging. Matthew 7 verse 1, the Message version says, "Don't pick on people, jump on their failures, criticise their faults, unless of course you want the same treatment." And that sums it up well. God is the only judge. And it's his opinion that ultimately holds any weight over our lives. And his opinion is love, and it's unconditional love, not the opinion of man. Okay, so although we know that God's opinion is love, and it ultimately holds any weight over our life, why do others' opinions still hold us back from spiritual action? So Hannah's just going to share a quick testimony just based off of this.
Yeah, I think I had a similar kind of high experience at work, and it's not very big, but it really spoke to me. It's been my first year of teaching last year, and I don't think at any point I felt qualified at all. Even though I knew it was where I was meant to be, I knew I was meant to be in that school, and I loved every second of it. It was so out of my comfort zone, and it was so hard. And so I had kind of like a term of struggling through, and it got halfway through the year, and I still just kind of felt a bit of imposter syndrome. I know that it was where I was meant to be, but I was still holding myself back, really. And so I wouldn't, give my full opinion in meetings because I was the NQT who's unqualified, even though I was, and God told me to be there. Or I wouldn't go 100% into an idea because I was holding myself back, and I was still loving it and thriving and doing well, but it didn't feel right. And I was on the tube, and I just said this to God, and I just felt him say that God saying, my opinion is the only thing that holds any weight over you. And although we still need to take criticism and feedback, it really was just what I needed to hear in that moment. And I felt, and nothing changed kind of day to day, but I felt like I'd been waiting for permission that wasn't there. And it just felt like I was then free to be myself at work, and kind of to anyone else looking on, it wouldn't have changed. But I felt freedom in that place to be who I was meant to be, really, in that place. And I realised that at the end of the day, it was just me that from doing that. And I just felt a huge wave of freedom.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So, the other thing that holds us back from being a worker and spiritually growing is comfort. Comfort restricts us without us knowing. You know, we like the way our thoughts are, the way our lives are, or maybe we don't, but we still don't do anything about it. Maybe because it's just easier to not go to what makes us feel uncomfortable. Because, you know, comfort zones are easier, they're less embarrassing, they're free from judgment. However, it's so difficult for God to grow you if your mindset is like this. An image that sums up this barrier well is a picture that Mum shared with us yesterday about a group of children who were playing in small waves on a beach. And then out of nowhere, an Olympic swimmer just walks down to the beach and plows into the sea and begins ferociously swimming into the waters. And she said that she felt God say that both actions are absolutely fine, but if you want to push into what God says, it's a decision for you, a decision that you have to make to get out of your comfort zone. It's a decision to be that Olympic swimmer. But you still don't lose the beauty of grace and the overwhelming love of God shown by the children playing on the shore. He still loves us either way, but if we want to get out of our comfort zone, he will help us if we ask.
So, how do we break down these barriers? Well, the enemy definitely isn't going to highlight them to us because he wants them to stay there. So therefore, we've got to listen when God does point them out. And it's always gently and in love, and it's always in perfect timing. He's not going to push you into something that you're not ready for. It's never rushed and it's never pressured, but it's also our responsibility to ask where those barriers are and to seek to knock them down ourselves with his guidance. So one way to knock down a barrier is to make sure that we understand and have an overwhelming fear of the Lord, because it's going to overpower any fear of man, any fear of judgment that we might have picked up along the way. Because sadly, people will always judge you, for good and for bad. And that's never going to go away. But if you have a fear of the Lord more than you fear man, it's going to be easier, and those comments are going to wash off. There's not going to feel like an immense fear in front of you, because his love does overpower anything else. And the other thing you could do is to grow yourself big enough so that you knock them down yourself. And this comes as well through journeying with God. All the glory goes to him. And it's not up to us to earn anything at all. So you also wanted to share a testimony, didn't you?
Yeah. So kind of over the past year, I've had some really tricky times with. Sorry, I was trying not to get emotional. I've had some really tricky times with friends and bullying. Sorry. And it made every day really difficult, really difficult. It got to the point where it would, affect my confidence and my self-belief. And it was really tricky. And so at the beginning of the year, on New Year's Eve, I was still being held back by these negative words. And my family prayed for me to be cut off by everything that had been spoken over me. And just to be free. And I realised that I still had to make a choice to remove myself from the situation. But after being prayed for, I just felt even more free to, because I realised the only thing holding me back in that situation was myself. And I think God often gets us through situations we can't control in one of two ways. He either changes the circumstance around you, or instead he grows you big enough to overcome the situation yourself. And that's what I felt like he did with me. I actively removed myself from the toxic situation and formed healthy friendships with completely new people, which was really scary to start with. It was really scary. But even more importantly, I felt God caused me to become more confident in the person that he called me to be. I felt qualified to be who I should be.
Yeah, amazing. So thirdly, the way that we can break down barriers is through prayer. and we'd really love to do that this morning, because as we said earlier, this requires a response to these words. So maybe Sarah, you might want to come up and start playing, and we could pray for some people, because we'd like to almost commission people this morning. So firstly, I'm just going to read Alison's Bible passage. IMG, Alison didn't write it, Matthew did, but she wrote it last Sunday. So maybe if you'd like to stand, and then I could almost speak it out over you, if you would like to. So as I read, maybe start to think about what barriers may have been built up over the last few years or weeks as the church has looked very different, and ask God to highlight in your life ways that are maybe preventing you in any way from being a worker in his field. So the passage says, "After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them, 'The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Go, I am sending you out like lambs among wolves.'"
Yeah, so in a second we're going to sing a few songs, and we'd love to pray for you for 2 things. So number 1 is praying for those who don't have enough confidence in themselves or self-belief, or have been spoken over negatively. That's a barrier I feel God really, really wants to break down in you. And just for those who don't think they're good enough, or don't think they're qualified,
And then secondly, we'd like to pray for those who would like a refreshing of the fear of the Lord versus a fear of man. If you want a refreshing of who you know God to be and the mighty power that he has over you, whether you're feeling a bit lost or a bit frustrated, we would love to pray for a refreshing fear of God, for you to know who he is. So as we begin to sing,